Hey everyone, how's it going? Cloud here, and welcome to my guide on the Goblin Slayer assignments. Now, if you're watching this guide, you're here for one of two reasons. Either you're aiming for 99 Slayer and want the best methods of dealing with this Slayer monster, or you're already 99 Slayer, aiming for 120 and wanting the best method to capture this monster's soul for your Slayer codex. Whatever reason you're here, this is the guide for you. Now, in this guide we'll be going through the following: the requirements to be assigned this monster as a task, which Slayer master assigns them and how many, best locations for the most effective kills, strategies and weaknesses of the monster, recommended equipment from highest to lowest, tips and tricks to obtain the soul for your codex or dungeon, social Slayer and its rewards, key drops to collect including handy items to help with this. Now, if you've already obtained 99 Slayer but haven't started the Sunken Pyramid Slayer Codex sort of activity, make sure you click the annotation in the video to view that before watching this one. You'll also find a link in the description below. Now, you can choose to watch a certain part of this guide if you wish, or you can just simply to play through the whole video. If you go in the description, there's links to each individual part and the time to skip to that section. Now, for this particular Slayer assignment, I'm going to show you two different versions of the goblins that you can kill, a low level and a high level choice. Now, depending on your preferences, you can go with whichever one most suits you. So for the lower level choice, these are the typical goblins that you can find across various locations on RuneScape. I'll talk about best location later on in the guide, but for the purpose of this guide, I'll be talking about the levels that the goblins will have in the recommended location, being Goblin Village. So for any typical goblin, no Slayer level is required to kill them, and no Slayer specific item required either. They're most commonly level 5, they have 200 life points, they have a max hit of 24, the weaknesses vary, however they will all be weak to some kind of magic spell, and it will depend on the location will be what the element is, so it could be fire, air, water, earth, etc. And obviously they attack with a melee style based attack. Now, for the higher level alternatives, so obviously it's up to you whether you go with this or not. However, if you're a high level player, I recommend being able to do this just to kind of increase the chance of perhaps getting a rare item. So the high level alternatives are the Sergeants of General Grador, so Sergeant Grimspike, Steel Will and Strong Stack, and obviously you'll find those guys alongside General Grador himself. So just to give you some information on their stats, again, no Slayer level will be required to be assigned them, and no Slayer item will be required to fight them. They are level 102, they all have 5,475 life points. Now, depending on which Sergeant will depend on whether they will be using a melee, range or magic style attack. And obviously depending on which combat style they're using will be what weakness. So talking about the combat triangle, if they're using melee they'll be weak to magic, if they're using range they'll be weak to melee, and if they're using magic they'll be weak to range. Now, depending on your strategy against General Grador will ultimately depend on the type of combat style you use against the Sergeants, but we'll speak about that a bit later on in the recommended equipment section. Now, as for Slayer Masters, the only Slayer Master to assign goblins as a task is Churel. Also, Churel can be found southeast of the Taverley Lodestone, and you can see the little Slayer icon on the mini-map. Now, if you completed the Wild Gothic Sleeps quest, Churel will be replaced by Spira, but they both have the same effect. So there's no actual sort of Slayer level required or combat level required to be able to use Churel as a task, and Churel will assign anything between 15 to 50 goblins per task. So as a recommended location, so there's two locations, and again this will depend on whether you're going with the low level version or the high level version. So if you're going for the standard goblins, the best location that I feel is the Goblin Village, and that is because obviously there's such a large variety of goblins here. It's going to make killing them as an assignment very quick and very effective. So to get to Goblin Village, the easiest way is going from the Falador Lodestone, and it's literally directly north from there. Now, for the high level version, obviously the only location to be able to fight Sergeant Grimspike, Steel Will and Strong Stack is in the God Wars dungeon. So obviously I would advise, if you've never been to God Wars, I wouldn't really go with this. This is obviously me suggesting it if you're used to going to God Wars and you're used to fighting against General Grador. But as a recap, just to remind you how to get there, if you go to the Trollheim Mountain, the God Wars dungeon is directly north from there. You need to either lift or squeeze past a boulder, and we'll have a level requirement depending on which one you go with, and then you'll get to the dungeon from there. And obviously the Bandos section you will find in the northwest area of the God Wars dungeon. You obviously need to get yourself to 40 kills for Bandos before you can go into the room with General Grador and the sergeants. So as for strategies using their weaknesses, for the low level recommendation at Goblin Village, obviously these goblins are primarily weak against fire spells. So you're going to want to use the magic approach for these, and again use fire spells, as this is what their weakness is. Now, as the area has several goblins spread throughout, if you use the multiple hitting abilities such as Chain and Dragon Breath, Flame Breath, whatever you call it, this will enable you to hit several goblins at once. Now there is a little handy thing that happens, that after you kill 15 goblins, one of the Goblin Village bosses will appear and you'll be able to attack them. Now I believe this counts towards one of your kills, and also you'll get a bit more XP off them as well. Now as for the sergeants, so obviously once you've got yourself the 40 kills, unless you've got the Bandos Soul Stone, where it will enable you to go straight in, what I would recommend obviously with these guys is you will be using whatever best equipment you find will be effective to kill General Grador. Now the sergeants respawn a lot quicker than what Grador does, especially if he's still alive. So what you can do is pretty much go after the sergeant straight away, because it doesn't take too long to kill them, especially if you're quite a high level to be fighting Grador in the first place. And then when you're concentrating back on Grador, you've got the chance that the sergeants will respawn. So if you're going after them in particular, obviously you can keep focusing your efforts on them, but obviously bear in mind that Grador's hits are a lot harder than them, so don't put yourself at risk of being killed. Now as for the Slayer's Soul, the chance of obtaining one is dependent on a few factors. So every kill has a chance of trapping that monster's soul. Now this is affected by your base Slayer level compared to the creature's required Slayer level to kill. So obviously in simple terms, the higher Slayer level you are, the more chance you have of capturing the Slayer monster's soul. So if the Slayer monster is only level 1 Slayer to be able to capture it, the soul drop is very common compared to if the Slayer monster requires level 99 Slayer to fight it, you're going to have a lot harder chance of getting that soul. Now, also being assigned a particular Slayer monster as an assignment doubles the chance of obtaining the soul compared to fighting one unassigned. So if you're assigned a monster as a task before you start killing it for its soul, you've got double the chance of obtaining one. So therefore it is quite worthwhile trying to get assigned one as a task if you're purposely going after a particular Slayer monster's soul. Also, being level 120 Slayer further doubles your chance of obtaining a Slayer monster's soul. Just obviously make sure you've got your Ujabdi in your inventory so you're able to capture this monster's soul successfully. Now, for the recommended equipment, obviously the low level version of the goblins are weak to magic based attacks, so therefore the recommended weapons and armor will be that of the magic category. Again, these are only recommendations, and what I normally do is just show a few screenshots of a low level, medium level and high level choice for the goblins. Now obviously because the high level alternative is against the sergeants, you're going to be wanting to go for a recommended setup that suits fighting against General Grador. So what I will do again is display sort of a magic, melee and range sort of style setup against General Grador and obviously his minions, and then you can go with whatever one most suits you. Again, it's only recommendations, so you can go for lower level versions of armor that I'm wearing or higher level versions of armor. The most important thing is you making sure you're wearing at least one piece of Bandos item, and the same for the other factions, so you're not ambushed throughout the God Wars dungeon. But again, this is all recommendations, so obviously tweak where you feel you need to, and if you've got any handy tips that you would suggest for items and equipment, you can put that in the comment section below. So I wanted to quickly talk about Social Slayer for those of you who don't know what that is. So Social Slayer is basically just like a normal Slayer assignment, however you can do it with a friend. So obviously I've been doing that myself with my good friend Thomas, aka Rune Movies, aka Mario Sonic, as we're both going about to obtain all the souls for our Slayer dungeon. Now how you go about doing this is with either your Slayer gem or if you have a Slayer helmet. If you right click that item, you can choose the option co-op options and then you can invite your friend to join a Slayer party with you. Do note though that once you're in a Slayer party, if you sort of go too far apart from each other or one of you logs out, you will exit the Slayer party and will have to rejoin, so just do take note of that. But basically you'll then, if one of you asks for a Slayer assignment from your respective Slayer master, you'll both share that assignment between the two of you, which is quite handy because some of you will be able to influence what assignments you get. Now obviously the only disadvantage is obviously there'll be less kills between the two of you. So for example, if Chirel assigns you 50, best case scenario is you'll have 25 each. But obviously the perks of it is that you'll complete the assignment quicker, which will mean you'll get more Slayer assignment points, but you'll also collect what's known as Slayer co-op points, which can be used for additional rewards. Now being in a co-op party doesn't affect the chance of getting a soul, so you're not going to be at a disadvantage of doing it. So if you and a friend are both trying to obtain all of your 151 souls, I would recommend doing this as it makes it a little bit more fun. And the rewards you can get from the co-op points are quite good. You have the ability to use food on your partner, you can both share the same protective equipment, there's all different varieties of things you can use, so it is definitely recommended if you're up for that sort of thing. Now in terms of key drops to collect from the Goblins, so for the lower level versions, obviously they will always drop bones, so that's always worth picking up unless you have a bone crusher to automatically bury them. Now in terms of the items, a lot of the stuff they drop is a load of crap if I'm honest, but they do drop a few sort of handy things that are worth picking up, so things like blood runes and nature runes. They will also drop a variety of grimy herbs such as Avento and Cadentine. They do drop talismans as well that are worth a little bit on the Grand Exchange, so it's always worth picking those up as well. But the main majority really in a nutshell is herbs, runes. They do also drop a couple of staffs of air if you're lucky, and again they can be either sold for a few coins on the Grand Exchange or high alchemized as well. And the standard Goblins will give you 6.6 Slayer experience per kill. Now, as for the sergeants themselves, so obviously completely different story in terms of the drops. So most of the time they will only drop bones and things like chili potatoes or kebabs or limpwort roots. Now the limpwort roots are worth collecting because they will drop them noted, so they are stackable and they can drop them in quantities of 5, which is obviously worth a fair bit. But naturally the main things you're looking out for, so they will drop various Bandos items such as the chest plates, tassets and boots. Now obviously these are very rare drops, so you'll be extremely lucky to get one, but it's always worth the chance, you know. And the same with the Godsword shards as well, there's a rare chance of them dropping them. But obviously the main thing here really is actually the XP reward you get for fighting them, so you'll get 199 Slayer experience every time you kill one of the sergeants, obviously because they're that much higher level in order to fight. So like I said, you're kind of going for a lucky chance of getting the Bandos items as a drop if you go after the sergeants as a Goblin Slayer assignment. Myself and my good friend Thomas, aka Rune Movies, as we got assigned these as a task and the normal Goblins would be far too easy for us, we thought we'd have a bit of a gamble and see if we get any Bandos items as drops. Unfortunately for us, we didn't in the footage. So there we are, that's my guide on the Goblin Slayer assignments. Now, I know not many of you will be watching this guide simply because the Goblins are quite an easy Slayer assignment to be assigned. However, I do wish to complete a guide for every single possible Slayer assignment, and obviously those of you who are just starting off may find it worthwhile to watch. So myself and Thomas will be planning to make a guide on every single one of the Slayer monsters that can be assigned as a task, and also every monster that can have its soul obtained, as we're both trying to go for 151 in our codex. So obviously there will be a lot higher level Slayer monsters and higher level guides to come as we get going, but we're just beginning with the low level ones. But if you are looking for more guides, just keep an eye out on my Slayer playlist, which these videos are added to, and more will be coming out as the coming weeks go by. But thank you very much for watching today. Please make sure you like, favourite, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends. Thanks everyone, and happy slaying.